They said I wasn't good enough for their precious son. For 15 years, my mother-in-law treated me like hired help in what she called her mansion. But when the lawyer read my father-in-law's will, her face went white. Turns out, my 8-year-old daughter now owned everything. If you love stories about karma and justice, stay until the end because you won't believe what happens. And if you enjoy these real-life stories, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss out. Trust me, this one's worth your time. My name is Sophie, and I need to tell you about the 15 years that nearly broke me, and the one day that changed everything. I met David at a library fundraiser where I worked as a kindergarten teacher. He was charming, kind, and for 2 years, I genuinely believed I'd found my happily ever after. But in those 2 years, I only met his parents 3 times. I should have known that was a warning sign. The first time I met Vivian, his mother, she looked me up and down in this expensive restaurant and said, "Oh, David mentioned you were simple, but I didn't realize he meant quite this simple." She laughed like it was a joke. Her husband George, however, was different. He asked about my students, my childhood, my dreams. When I told him I was raised by a single mother and became a teacher to give children the stability I'd needed, he smiled warmly and said, "That's the kind of purpose that matters, Sophie. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for it." I held on to those words like a lifeline for the next 15 years. After we married, George insisted we move into the family mansion. He said it was too big for just him and Vivian, that it needed children's laughter. David was thrilled. I was hesitant, but I convinced myself it was generous. That was my biggest mistake. Within a week, Vivian had let herself into our rooms 3 times without knocking, rearranged my kitchen cabinets, and told me my decorating taste was charmingly rustic, in a tone that made it clear there was nothing charming about it. When I got pregnant with Lily, things got worse. Vivian had opinions about everything and bought an entire nursery without consulting me. I came home to find it all set up, white and gold and sterile, and I cried. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because nothing was mine anymore. George quietly returned half of it and took me shopping to choose pieces I actually wanted. Vivian didn't speak to us for a week. The years that followed were death by 1,000 cuts. Vivian planned family photos when I had to work, then acted surprised I wasn't in them. She introduced me to her wealthy friends as David's wife. She was a teacher before, as if I'd ceased to exist. She corrected my grammar in front of guests. She told my daughter Lily that some people were born with class, while others had to work very hard to learn it, staring directly at me as she said it. And David, he became a master of avoiding conflict. Every time I tried to talk to him about his mother, he'd say I was being too sensitive, that keeping the peace was important. Part of me died every time he chose silence over defending me. But I stayed. I stayed because George was my ally. He never let Vivian's comments go unchallenged when he was around. And he spent hours with Lily, teaching her to garden and think critically. He'd wink at me over dinner when Vivian was ranting. And that small gesture kept me sane. Late at night when I couldn't sleep, we'd have tea and talk about real things. He told me once that watching me parent Lily with patience and love, despite everything, had taught him what true strength looked like. By the time Lily was 8, I'd become a ghost in that mansion. I volunteered at her school, kept house, and avoided Vivian as much as possible. George's health had started declining, and Vivian had begun dropping hints about when the house is finally mine, and all the changes she'd make. Then came the charity gala, and something inside me finally broke. Vivian had been planning this fundraiser for months, and I'd spent weeks helping with preparations. The night of the event, I'd bought a new dress and actually felt beautiful. George told me I looked lovely. Then I overheard Vivian in the conservatory with her friends. One asked who'd done the wonderful decorations, and Vivian laughed and said, "Oh, mostly the event planner, but the help pitched in too. We're probably too kind to some of our staff." Her friend asked her to point out the help, And Vivian said, "The one in the teal dress trying too hard. She's actually David's wife, but between us, she's more useful organizing than socializing." I don't remember leaving that room, but I remember sitting on Lily's bedroom floor, tears ruining my makeup, trying to breathe. Lily found me there. My 8-year-old daughter wrapped her arms around me and said, "Don't cry, Mama. Grandpa George says you're the strongest person he knows. He told me people who hurt others are just showing how weak they are inside." In that moment, I realized I'd been teaching my daughter the wrong lesson. I'd been showing her to accept being treated badly, to stay quiet, to make yourself smaller. What kind of mother does that make me? The following week, Vivian announced she was redecorating the entire mansion. She wanted Lily's artwork off the walls, my family photos removed, everything that showed we lived there erased. For the first time in 15 years, I told her no. I said this was my home too, and if she touched one picture my daughter drew, I'd leave and take Lily with me. She laughed in my face and said, "Go ahead, Sophie. David will never choose you over this family's fortune. You need us far more than we need you." David sat there and said nothing. That night, I packed bags for Lily and me. Before I could leave, David came to our room and actually saw the suitcases, saw my face. He broke down and admitted he'd been a coward, begged for one more chance to prove he could change. I agreed to stay, but moved Lily and myself to guest rooms on the opposite side of the mansion. 2 days later, George passed away in his sleep. The funeral was surreal. I genuinely mourned him. He'd been the only person who treated me like I mattered. Lily was heartbroken. Vivian barely waited until the burial was over before talking about estate planning and asking when the will would be read. The family lawyer, Mr. Patterson, scheduled a formal reading for the following week and specifically requested my presence. Vivian complained that I was attending, even complained that Lily was with me, but Mr. Patterson insisted. The reading started with smaller bequests to charities and relatives. Then the business holdings went to David, as expected. Vivian sat back with visible satisfaction. Then Mr. Patterson opened a second document and read, "Regarding the family mansion, all properties held within the estate trust and the associated investment portfolios, I leave everything in its entirety to my granddaughter, Lily Margaret Henderson." The silence was deafening. Vivian's face went from smug to confused to furious. The lawyer explained that the estate would be held in trust and managed by me, with complete authority over all decisions, until Lily turned 25. Vivian stood up, shaking. "This is a mistake. George would never." Mr. Patterson interrupted. "There's a letter." Mr. Henderson requested I read this aloud. He cleared his throat and began reading George's words. "My dearest Lily, I've watched your mother endure 15 years of cruelty in my home. I've watched my son fail to protect the woman he claims to love. This house shouldn't belong to people who use it as a weapon. Sophie, you've earned this through every day you stayed strong, every insult you absorbed with grace. Vivienne, you never understood that class isn't about money or breeding. It's about character. You failed that test every day. David, protect your family or lose them. Lily, be like your mother, be strong, be kind, and never let anyone make you small." By the end, I was crying. Lily was crying. But Vivian was screaming that she'd contest it, that George had lost his mind. Mr. Patterson calmly explained the will was ironclad, written 2 years ago when George was in perfect health. Then Vivian dropped her bomb. Red-faced and shaking, she turned to me and hissed, "I know what you did. George wrote this will because you were having an affair with him. Saint Sophie, seducing her elderly father-in-law to secure your daughter's inheritance." The accusation was so absurd, I couldn't respond. David's head snapped up. Lily looked at me with frightened eyes. Before I could defend myself, Mr. Patterson stood. "Mrs. Henderson, I strongly advise you to stop talking. What you're suggesting is defamatory." He pulled out another sealed envelope. "Your late husband anticipated you might make such accusations." He broke the seal and pulled out a journal. Mr. Henderson kept detailed records of every interaction in this house for 2 years, every insult, every humiliation, documented with dates and witnesses. He also investigated rumors you'd been spreading about Sophie having affairs with the gardener and David's colleagues, all false, created by you to isolate her further. Then came the twist. Mr. Patterson's voice turned ice cold. But Mr. Henderson also discovered that you, Vivienne, have been having an affair with his business partner, Harold Sinclair, for 7 years. He has documentation, photographs, hotel receipts, everything. He chose not to expose you because of his health and to protect David and Lily. But if you contest this will, or make any further accusations about Sophie, all of this becomes public record in court. Your choice. Vivienne's face turned white. David looked sick. Vivienne left the room without a word and moved out that same day. She never came back. Mr. Patterson handed me the keys and George's journal, saying he'd wanted me to have it so I'd never doubt my own reality. That night, I read through the journal. Every incident I'd minimized was documented in George's handwriting. The final entry, written 3 days before he died, said, "Watched Sophie comfort Lily after another cutting remark. The child asked why Grandma V was so mean, and Sophie said some people are unhappy inside, but we can choose kindness." That's when I knew I'd made the right decision. Teaching Lily that strength looks like her mother, that's legacy. I cried until I had no tears left. Then I made decisions. David and I went to intensive marriage counseling. It was brutal, but slowly he started to change. He set boundaries with his mother and went to therapy alone to unpack his childhood damage. I turned the mansion into a real home, with Lily's artwork everywhere and comfortable furniture instead of showpieces. I kept George's study exactly as it was, a tribute to the man who saved us. And I created a foundation in George's name that helps women leave toxic situations, providing housing, support, legal aid, and therapy. We've helped 43 women and their children in 6 months. Lily understands now what her grandfather did and why. We visit his grave every Sunday and tell him about the lives we're changing. Vivienne lives in a modest condo, now on a small trust she can't access the principal of. She tried rebuilding her relationship with David, but only on her terms, so he chose us. She sent Lily a birthday card last month. Lily read it, said, "No thank you," and threw it away. 8 years old, and already stronger than I was at 35. I wasn't too simple. I wasn't too common. I wasn't too ordinary. I was exactly enough. I always was. George didn't just give Lily an inheritance. He gave us validation, security, and proof that someone saw the truth and cared enough to act. Sometimes karma works in the most unexpected ways. My father-in-law gave us more than a mansion. He gave us validation, security, and peace. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is always worth it. Subscribe for more real-life stories of justice and karma. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself. Thank you for listening to my story.